first time that I had a wondering about my own sexuality, I think I was in grade 6 and I was watching the news and there was a story about a kid who was bullied at school because he was gay. And I had this like, I wonder if that would happen to me. And it was weird that that was what translated, but I was like, I had never thought about that necessarily for myself, but I think it was maybe the first introduction of, oh, this is what the world is like if someone's super different. Like up
Yeah.
until then, I had already been like quite tomboyish and um, so yeah, that was kind of my first opening of wondering. And then fast forward high school, I read a book and it was called What's So Amazing About Grace. And in it, this pastor was um, coming out and he lost his whole congregation. He lost his wife, his kids, like his whole world blew up. And again, like I read that and was like, what if that happens for me? Because at that point I knew I wanted to like be a pastor or do something in the church to help people. And I was like, what if that happened? Never ever guessing that I could like marry a woman and do work in spirituality and it be okay. Like that, I had no examples of that and no idea that that could be a possibility. And so I actually wrote the author Philip Yancey, and he wrote me back. And
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, I was like really amazed. And he basically said, like, is there someone in your local vicinity that you could talk to about this stuff? And I was like, yeah, that's probably wise. And so I talked to my youth pastor, and she basically just like walked me through all the verses that said, no, that's not okay, and
Oh,
helped me like pray it away. And so I just kept like pushing it back, pushing it like to the back of my subconscious and trying to like pretend it wasn't even there as a thing and continue with my life as I could. And I had a great life. Like I had amazing adventures and lived a lot of different places. Became a pastor, um, did all kinds of cool things. And then I would say after I was a pastor, I went to go do my master's and I did a master of arts in spiritual formation. And in that, I started to like sit with people and help them pay attention to what's going on in the deep places. That was my practicum. And so I loved it. It was so juicy to get to sit with people, help them notice where the divine is showing up in their lives. And at the same time, I was going to this church in Vancouver that was starting to open this conversation about how could you be gay and a Christian. And that was kind of amazing to have this like conversation opening up and start to see like, oh, like maybe there could be a possibility of this. And there were some beautiful lesbian couples in the church that I could look at and be like, whoa, like you're respected and you're here contributing. And um yeah, the church, like sadly they've had to stay like quite narrow still in their practices because of the larger denomination, and that's another story maybe for another day. um
can I ask you, frame wise, when you started to question things here, like when you were saying you were, sixth grade,
mhm.
right? What year is this?
Okay, 92, 93,
92.
somewhere
Yeah,
around.
I'm just trying to think of like cultural acceptance changes so much over
Mhm.
the years. So I'm just kind of
Yeah.
like trying to envision where we're at there. But okay, so
Yeah,
then the church.
2000 is when I graduated, and like it still wasn't super open.
Right, right. Well, it's still not where it should be today, but we are
Right.
definitely getting much better, I think, as a
Yeah.
society. But yeah, slow baby steps. I want to talk about this church situation just for a second with you. So, what was it that made you want to be a pastor at such a young age? Do you come from a very religious family?
Yeah, my parents were missionaries in Kenya when I was growing up, so it's like in my DNA kind of thing. Like it
Yeah,
was kind of all I knew in some ways.
yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
I
Uh,
always have been someone that likes to help people, and so I the way that I knew to do that was to be a youth pastor, and so that's what I
yeah.
did.
Yeah. So, I mean, oh my gosh, that would be so contradicting in your mind, I bet, right? To want to be a pastor and to want to do that kind of work, but then also having the people that you respect and look up to all around you. So, I'm assuming like with your parents and with your pastor, this like, oh no, we're not going to talk about that stuff. Let's push that down
Hmm.
and close that off. That like even if you try to push it away, like it's still got to be in there, right? So
Mhm.
this like conflict, this internal conflict of who you think you want to be, but then who you think you are so
Mhm.
contradicting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like I got really good at pushing it to the back of my mind so it wasn't forefront, but I'm
Yeah.
sure that it still was taking up a lot of bandwidth for me.
Right. Right. I mean, I think human nature, we're really good at pushing things away that we
Mhm.
feel we,
Mhm.
can't live our truth. But there's such a powerful message in that because, like, clearly you did still figure it out, right? Like, you figured out that, like, you've found this environment where you can still have your belief system and be true to yourself and that that's okay.
Mhm.
And that's hard to find. But for listeners, like, it is out there, like, you
Mhm.
really have to look around.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't want religion to ever teach my children it wasn't okay to be true to yourself no matter what that looks like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, that's
know?
so important.
Yeah, so they are out there, people, keep looking if you're,
Mhm.
but I feel like a lot of times people steer away from religion.
Mhm.
Did you go through, a little bit of, like, a religion crisis yourself in any ways?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think especially in the LGBT community, it's like you
Yeah,
either need to choose to be gay or Christian, and they seem like not inclusive of each other. And so to be able to hold both of those in tension is hard. And so, yeah, I would say now like my spirituality has opened up a lot and
mhm,
much broader. And I don't even know if I would say just that I'm a Christian, just that I'm a spiritual person and that I gather wisdom from all different traditions. And
yeah,
I've come to study all these different mystics in different traditions, and they all come back to the same place of love.
yeah,
And so it's like we don't need to be caught up in all these tribalisms anymore. It's
mhm.
there's gifts from all of them. And so yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. Every group of any type of higher power, whatever it looks like, they all do come back to this, like, love each other, be loving, you're worthy of love, right? Like, those types of
Mhm.
messages are the ones that, like, resonate with me, and it's like, I don't think any of us are 100% right or 100% wrong.
The next thing was that I built a tiny house because I couldn't see myself long term. I was in Vancouver at the time, and in Vancouver is like really high cost of living,
Yeah,
and a lot of people are getting evicted for renovation so that the cost of living can be even higher. And so it was just like I couldn't see a future for myself there. And I was done my master's, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna build this tiny house. And the first place I could find to park it was back in Calgary, where I grew up in that province. It's kind of like the Texas area of Canada.
nice.
Which is so ironic that I left Vancouver, which is very progressive, to go to this conservative area of the country and then came out. But there was
Yeah.
something in that like anonymity, I think, because like in Vancouver, I was on the board of my church. I was meeting
Mhm,
with people, helping them, spiritually advising them. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to be accepted in my field or respected if I come out.
mhm,
And in moving, I kind of like hunkered down and just like had this cocoon of my tiny house and was able to start fresh and really like get honest about like what is true about me. I had seen those examples of beautiful lesbian couples, and I was like, okay, like this, I think it's time. And at the same time, I was invited to a friend of mine from um, like Bible camp days when I was a kid, her wedding, and she was marrying a woman down in
mhm.
Mexico. And so it was this all inclusive. We were there for a week and hanging out with everybody. And um, there was a night at the pub where we were all sitting around and these drunk guys came in and they're like, so how many lesbians are there at this lesbian wedding? And everyone laughed and they're like, well, guess. And so they start going around the circle and they go to my friend. She's got long brown hair. She's an Anglican priest. And they're like, no. And she's like, yeah, actually, my girlfriend's waiting for me back home. And they go to my other friend and she's got short blonde hair and she's a hairdresser. And they're like, oh, yeah, she's gay. And that she's like, no, I've got a husband and 3 kids waiting for me back home. And then they go to me and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't know either. It was like this moment of confession where I just like fit it out. And from then on, it was like out there.
Yeah.
And like my friend checked in with me later and was like, okay, like that probably was really big for you to even say out loud. And like,
Mm.
what's next now? And
Oh, I'm so glad your friend checked in with you like that. Because so many
yeah,
times people, especially like you're at a bar setting, like, haha, we've been drinking and like blow it off and it's like
yeah,
it's nothing.
yeah. So then when I got back, it was like, okay, like I actually want to lean into this. And I recognized that there was so many things that I was doing in my life because I was worried about what other people would think. Like I have a motorcycle license, but I didn't want to ride because people might think I'm a lesbian. I
Mhm.
wanted to have an asymmetrical haircut, but I was like, no, people think I'm a lesbian. I can't do that. And so I was just like, done with that. I'm ready to start living my life for me and the way that I feel called to live. And so I called a friend of mine who's a hairdresser and got her to shave the side of my head, and called my parents and was like, I got a haircut and this is what it represents, and told them. And it was, hard at first. They took it, they had some inklings because I'd shared a little bit of it like back in high school days. So it wasn't like a huge shock. But I think the shock for them was like, you're not going to fight this anymore. Just keep praying it away. Like we all have these thorns in the flesh that we need to work through. And um,
Mm.
yeah, so it really got harder when I decided to start dating, because then it was like, oh, you're really not turning back from this. And like, this could really change your whole life. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like my whole life is changed anyways. So
How old were you at this point?
like 33.
Wow, you came out much later than most, I'd say, right? Well, and
Yeah.
I guess it depends generationally, right? Like I mean, like I know people that were in their 40s or 50s when they came out, just because like it was not okay for them to until more recently. But yeah, that's a long time of your life to like live not being true to yourself, right? I bet
Mm-hmm.
that felt so scary, but also like relieving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely was both of those.
Right? I would imagine. I mean, especially like, yeah, introducing yourself into the dating world. I mean, did you date men before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like dating like it was my job. I was trying really hard to find someone to have a life with because I really wanted to
Mm.
be a wife and a mom. And it just was like not inspiring. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
forcing all these connections that were just like,
Right.
like sure,
Right.
you're a lawyer, you're lovely, like I could make this work, but it wasn't exciting to me. It wasn't like,
Right. There wasn't an intimate connection, right?
it
It's
wasn't
like,
there wasn't a spark.
so what was that like introducing yourself into the dating world with women? Was
I
that
wasn't
super scary?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure where to start because like I'd been doing tons of online dating with men, and like the online dating with women was just as uninspiring and just
Yeah.
like, well, so I just started reaching out to friends of mine that were lesbians and saying like, do you know anyone? Like, here's me. And so I had a few people set me up with people, and again, it was just like, sure, like you're nice, but nothing. And then the other thing, I was like, where do you meet the thoughtful lesbians? Because I didn't just want to go to the bar scene. It wasn't really my scene.
Right.
And I was like, church. And so I, like you, I looked for like a church in my area that was open, and so there was this queer church that had started up recently. And so I went to it, and like it was fine. It was a little bit uninspiring at first, spiritually, but I was like, but it's a cool way to connect with people. And so I went back the next Sunday, and um I saw this beautiful black woman, and I was like, I used to like black men. Maybe I like black women. And so I like strategically went to go sit behind her, and she was with this other woman, and they weren't sitting super close. I was like, I don't think they're together. And then there was a point in the service where we had to interact with each other. So I just started chatting with them, and me and the black woman were asking each other all these questions. And I told them my whole coming out story and stuff. And this other woman was sitting with her, and she was like super quiet. And I was like, okay, like she's just not really interested in this conversation. And then I gave them both my card because I just am always networking. Um, and when I gave the other woman my card, she like took a picture of it and put it in her phone right away. And I was like, that's interesting for someone who doesn't really want to talk with me very much. And then when we left, I walked out to my car, and that other woman followed me out, and she was like, There's more of my story that I want to tell you, but it wasn't quite the right context. Like, could we go for coffee sometime? And I was like, sure. Like, I wasn't sure if she was like wanting my spiritual accompaniment because I was still doing that work,
Hmm.
or friendship, or to date me, or like what. And so we went for lunch, and yeah, she just spewed it out of like, I think I'm gay, but you're only the second person I've ever told, but you felt safe, so I just wanted to tell you. And I was like, okay, thank you, I'm
Oh,
honored. And what do you want me to do with this information? Like, do you want my support professionally, as a friend? Like, what are you looking for? And she's like, I just want you to be my friend, I don't want you to coach me or anything like that. And I'm like, okay, at least you know what you want. And so then a few weeks later, I was like, do you want to come see my tiny house? Because I knew that she was into that kind of home style stuff. And
I want to come see your tiny
I know,
house.
right?
That's awesome.
And she did. And she brought me a chai, and we went for a walk. And on the walk, it was a day kind of like today that was like super icy out because it was February. And we had to slide down this hill to get to the river where we were going. And we both ended up just like sliding on our bums, and she was squealing on the way down. And I was like, in that moment, it was like this click of, I want to have fun with her for a long time. And from then
Oh,
on, it was like history. And
this
we
is your
since
wife?
we since got married on that same hill. Now we toboggan with our
So
kids on that
cute.
same hill. Like, it's,
Oh my gosh. And
yeah,
it's
it's
it
pretty
was the
special.
other woman that was
Yeah.
sitting there. I love that
Totally.
story. So cute. I was super intrigued with this, having children in an unconventional way. And I know you and your wife both have carried children, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have two kids. You carried one, she carried one. And I would love if you're open to sharing that story with me.
Yeah, so we couldn't decide who should go first. We both knew we wanted to be moms and carry a baby. And like, we were like, do we just like play Russian roulette and see who should go first? And we found a donor, a known donor, because we wanted to be able to do it at home rather than have this like medical procedure where someone else does it for us, because it's like this beautiful process of our love coming together to make a child. And
Yeah,
so um yeah, we decided to try at the same time, and with the knowledge that it might happen at the same time, and being fully okay with that, that some of the benefits for us would be that in Canada we get a year of mat leave, and so we could both have a year off to just like enter into this world as a family.
that's
And
nice.
the other one is that then we could both breastfeed both babies and have that kind of a biological connection
Oh
that we
my
wouldn't be able
gosh,
to
that's
have.
awesome. I never
Hmm.
even thought about that. That's
Yeah,
incredibly awesome.
that's my favorite part. Like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
been so cool.
That wouldn't have even crossed my mind, but that makes perfect sense. I mean, why wouldn't you? They're
Hmm.
both your kids and you're together and you both have hormonally can breastfeed. That's great. I love that.
Hmm. And so, yeah, it happened, and we got pregnant 25 days apart, had our babies 25 days apart, and now we have a son and daughter who are almost 3. And that cross contamination of cells has been really beautiful, because like I carried our daughter, and my wife is like really connected with her, and our son and I are so connected, and it's so beautiful to see that, like, we're all
That
have,
motherly bond is there for
yeah,
both of you with both. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think that that's great. I actually have a friend who has they adopted a baby, and she went to a doctor to find out how to start having a breast milk supply,
Mm-hmm.
and she breastfed her adopted newborn. And
Yeah,
I didn't know that was possible either. I mean, there's so much. It's amazing. It's
yeah, it really
amazing to
is.
me, and it really helped that connection and that bond, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't anyone listening, like we're not saying it's you can't bottle feed your kids. If you need to bottle feed your kids, that's fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a special thing that you were able to do. I love that. So I love this whole journey. I mean, that alone tells me like how much passion and experience you would have to help others that are trying to come out and find themselves. And I really want to talk about somebody from like the other perspective,
Mm-hmm.
or how to create an environment where it's safe for someone to come out to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to talk about that. I mean, we see this all the time nowadays, I feel like on videos, on social media and stuff like that, right? Like when teenagers come out to their parents and then they're crying because the reaction was just
Hmm.
so toxic.
Yeah. Yeah, so I actually have some freebies on my website if people want like the step-by-step guides of like what not to say, what to say on there. But
Yeah, we can link that in the description below. So you can find that below if you're listening.
mhm. I'd say like the number one thing if someone is coming out to you, like they've already really probably weighed the pros and cons of coming out to you or not, and have said like you're safe enough that I'm going to try.
Yeah.
And so like honor their story and that they're coming to you with that. And then one of the best questions you can ask is like, how are you feeling about that? Rather than making it about you and like, oh, I can't, I didn't know that about you or something like that, but being like, how are you feeling now that you have said that out loud or now that you've realized that about yourself? And because I think a lot of times that one of the dangers is that it gets turned around on the person that's receiving the news when it's really the subject of the story is the person that's coming out. And so as much as we can keep the focus on that person, that's the main the Cole's Notes version of
Yeah.
how to do that well.
I mean, that makes sense to me. It's like when anybody comes to you with any information about something they're going through in life, first, like honoring the fact that they trust you, that you're a safe place for them to share that, and to absolutely not making it about yourself. And because they're already making it about the other person a little bit, probably, right? Like, how are they going to react? What are they going
Mm-hmm.
to say next? What are they thinking? Instead of staying in their own feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
So putting that back in their boat.
Yeah.
Are there common things that you hear that happen a lot that are just like don't do this?
Yeah, I think like one of the ones is like, are you sure? And like that is not super helpful because if they've, you know, gotten the courage to even say it out to you, they've done a lot of thinking about it and processing it already. So um,
Yeah.
that's almost like a like, are you sure? Could I change your mind? Could you turn back around on this? And it's like, no, that's not super helpful. I think the other one is like often it's connected to spirituality stuff, and so like I experienced of this is where in the Bible it says it's wrong or you can't do that, and like for me, I think that the the reading of the Bible in these certain passages has evolved with time,
Yeah.
and the same way that the reading of the passages about slavery have evolved with time. And like Christians back in the 19th century had slaves. And now it's like, I don't think that's quite right. And we're, we're having to reread the text in the context of where we are today. And so just like pointing out these verses that say it's wrong are not helpful and are not necessarily the only way to read that text. Yeah. There's a really helpful movie getting made soon called 1946. And so if people are really struggling with the spirituality part of it, it goes into kind of the history of these certain texts. And like in 1946 is the first time homosexuality was mentioned in the Bible. And so it's like that's a pretty recent addition in there.
That is.
And so, yeah, you can look it up on Instagram too. They're starting to put a lot of posts on there.
Yeah, I'm gonna write it down. I
And
don't
I
know.
would even push like you're saying, I think God could care less whether you marry a woman or a man. Like I actually think God really cares, or like the divine is making us in the divine's image, and the divine is both male and female and like non-binary, and so it's like I think the more that queer folks stand up and share who they are in all spectrums of how they identify, how they like sexually and also gender identity wise, we're sharing the divine and giving people an image of the divine in the world. And so that's actually just enriching the world rather than,
Yeah.
this view that we have that you're damaged or broken, there's
Yeah.
something wrong with you. It's like it's actually a really beautiful gift to share with the world.
That's how you were born. That is who you are, right? It's not something that just happens, right? Like, and I feel like that's such a hard part for people that are more old school or super religious or stuck in
Mhm.
their ways to understand is like, it's not a choice. It's not like you wake up one day and was like, I changed my mind. I'm gonna, I'm gonna be
Mhm.
gay. It's like you eventually decide to be true to yourself is more kind of what happens there, right?
Mhm.
I mean, when we're talking about this, like what I'm envisioning is like teenagers or someone in their 20s or maybe like you in their 30s and they're coming out to like family. But what about the younger ones? I feel like is the advice the same or is it a little different on like how to communicate with um like just younger kids that are questioning their sexuality?
I have a really great podcast on my episode on my podcast of
Yeah.
a mom of a trans kid, and she shares her story of what that's been like to journey with her
Oh,
son
I
through
love
that
that.
transition. So that's a helpful resource. But I think it's the same of like keep being a safe space for your child to talk to you about all the things and stay curious. Like, keep asking them what's going on for them rather than just like assuming or being closed off and like I don't want to talk about that stuff. um, I think the key for all our relationships is maintaining an open heart. And how
Mhm.
can we maintain an open heart through all of this and stay curious?
Yeah. So let me ask you from like a mother's perspective here. Like, so do you think when you say like keep that line of communication open with them if they're having those kind of thoughts and feelings, then is too it can there be too much as well? Like, should you not don't bring it up all the time? Don't you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Let it come from them
Yeah,
and
let
like,
them lead for sure.
yeah. Right, because my because I definitely could see myself being like like not every day or anything, but occasionally being like, "Just checking in with you and like how you're feeling about all this." But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I overdo it, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
I always want to talk about feelings." So, okay, so let them come to you and always be ready to
Mm-hmm.
listen when they do.
I think, there's always those worries of are they going to be teased
That's what
and
I was gonna ask. Yeah.
how's that going to be? And so, um, yeah, being a supportive space where they can talk through that stuff and, maybe talking through before they go out with a certain outfit or something of like, how will this be received, do you think? And what can
Mm,
you do to strengthen who you are within you to like, so that you know who you are
yeah.
and the other people, whatever they say, doesn't matter so much. And
Yeah.
the more that we can be secure in who we are, even at a young age, I think that helps.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think, like, even if you are supportive as a parent, we still can be afraid of what the outside world is going to say or do to tear our kids down. And I mean, like, obviously, as a parent, like, you're a mother, right? Like, it's like we always want to protect our kids the best we can, and we can't
Mm-hmm.
protect them from everything. But this feels like for me, like, when my 17-year-old found out she was pregnant, she didn't know what she was going to do. And she broke down crying one day and she said, I don't want to end the pregnancy, but I am so afraid of being judged for being such a young mom. And
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at her and said, honey, it doesn't matter what you choose here today, somebody's going to judge you. So
Mm-hmm.
screw everybody else's opinion. What do you want the next chapter of your life to look like? And what's going to
Totally.
make you happy, right? And that's
Yeah.
what you have to decide to do. And this is the same, I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
in that concept is creating that safe space to like, you can't protect them. People are going to judge your kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to. And I mean, and especially if you have a child who's questioning their sexuality in any sort of way, somebody's going to judge them. There's going to be, I mean, they say it to each other even if they're like they use like these as like derogatory terms, right? In school.
Yeah.
So, it's just unfortunately it is all around us and it's never hopefully someday in a perfect world, but right now we don't live there yet, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to happen. So reminding them, listen, people are going to not like this. People are going to judge you for it. And some people might not want to be your friend because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
But what's important? Do you want to pretend to be somebody or not? And have these people that will only love you if you look the way they want you to look? Or do you want to be true to yourself and then find those people that will love you for who you are?
Mm-hmm. And that's the heart of the work that I do, even with like later in life lesbians coming out
Hmm.
of like, I'm a safe space for you to speak your truth out loud. and finally like hear it for yourself, maybe for the first time even. And then we will then strategize of like, who are you, who do you celebrate that you are, and then how can you share that with the world in an empowered way rather than like this sheepish like, oh, there's this thing about me. But like coming out and being like, yeah, this is who I am, I've come to know who I am and I really like it, and I'd like you
Mm.
to know me.
Oh my
And
gosh. Yeah.
right, it's such a different energy.
And I mean, even if you're not struggling with like who you are sexually, I feel like that's true to for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere, anytime. Like the amount of how your life can change when you learn to value and have self-love and like respect the person you are and the journey you've been on in life is so eye-opening,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
like you definitely had to go on that journey. I know I definitely have been on that journey, and like the person I am today is so much stronger than the person I was even like 5, 10 years ago because
Mm-hmm.
I'm so like I know I'm not perfect. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm okay with those mistakes. I don't hold a grudge against myself for them. I love who I am today, and I just feel like that's true for so many people. Like that would resonate for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Self-love. Self-love,
Yeah.
do the work. You talked about personality, like a personality kind of test thing you do with people. Like there's two,
Mm-hmm.
right? To like really get to know them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called the Superpowers Discovery Session, and it's
That's
I
cute.
love it
I like
because
the
it,
name.
yeah, like because I think a lot of us don't even realize we have superpowers, but how amazing would the world be if we all knew what they ours were and were sharing them more impactfully in the world?
Yeah.
So that's
I
why I
love
love
that.
helping people discover it, and it brings together like spirituality from all the different religions, which I also love. And so there's like astrology, chakras, the I Ching from China, Kabbalah, like all these different things that we can help you determine like what is your purpose, what is your like some of your huge gifts in the world to
Mm,
share, and help people have more courage in sharing them. And most of the time when people do a session with me on that, they know these things like as they see it written down, they're like, oh yeah, I had a sense of that, but now see it on paper, it's like, yeah, I'm really going to do it now.
mm.
I'm really going to live into that.
Yeah,
So
sometimes we need to be validated, right? Like, don't you feel like if
totally.
we're in a place where we just aren't sure of ourselves or feeling confident, that gives people like a validation of
Mm-hmm.
who they are and who their identity is. I love that. And so many people struggle with what their purpose is.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't? Right. Like there's so many of us that are just going day by day in society and doing what we need to do to provide for our families and to live our lives and be healthy. And we run out of time to do self discovery.
Yeah. And have, I'm a bit of a self discovery junkie. So I've done many of these different things. And so a few years ago at a personal growth seminar, I came up with this phrase that is my purpose statement. And so I nurture others to exude their special. And
Yeah.
so
I love that.
I love doing that.
Do you have any big tips for people that are struggling with like finding their self identity and self love? Like, what is something that you would tell people that work with you that they can do at home?
I think one of the first things is slowing down, like taking a moment for yourself, taking a day off and like going and sitting in nature, like getting off our phones. Like life is so busy right now.
Hmm.
And so the more that we can like pause the busyness and check in, that's when you'll start to hear things, like because you won't hear it's unless it's yelling, like if it's your body breaking down or
Mm,
like some other thing happening. And so if you want to catch it before that happens,
don't
take
we?
some time to pause and listen. Super excited about I do retreats periodically throughout the year, and I have a new one that I'm doing for parents of kids that are coming out. And so whether it's your small kid or your adult kid, um, people need that support. And so like I love the questions that you're asking today because it's so pertinent for people to have support. And I think there's not a lot of resources for that. And so being a safe space for parents to come and they'll hear other parents' stories. I'll have some speakers coming in that are further along and have years of being out with their kids and having their success stories. And then also being a safe space for them to share their story of like how hard this has been, and then resources of what would be helpful ways to support your kid in their coming out journey. And so I'm doing this one. Usually I have them over a weekend, but this one's going to be over 4 Tuesday nights in the month of April. And so people can come get to know people over that whole month, and then have a supportive community going forward with them in their journey.
I love that. That sounds amazing. I'm glad that you have created a safe space for people to be able to do that, because you're right, there isn't a lot of resources for the parent side of things. There really
Mm-hmm.
isn't. Well, I would really, really have appreciated having you on the show today. And I would love to know and share with everybody where they can find more information out about you. And I will make sure to link it all below.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my website is centered.ca because I'm in Canada. And you can find me on social media, Nancy Shadlock, most places.
Yep. And your podcast is linked on your website as well,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yeah, it's called The Coming Out Chronicles. It's on
Yes.
all the platforms.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been an
Thank
awesome
you.
conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you.